Good Tuesday morning. To now, this is directly the second week of Easter, and it's the follow-through. You're going to see the Acts of the Apostles. It's the early church. Isn't actually great, actually, the truth be told. You're seeing in the early going to church, you saw the first week, the resurrection accounts. Now you're seeing the life of the church. And to use an expression that I heard many, many years, they're figuring it out as they're going, okay? And it's neat. And they're getting their brains knocked out. They're getting out of trouble with the Jewish leaders, etc., and the Romans, etc., but they're persevering, and they're uncontainable. That's where you'll see that lesson. Every time they get thrown in jail, they somehow get out, and they're out there preaching. They are determined to preach the gospel of the risen Christ, the dead and risen Christ, you see. And no matter what these guys try to do to shut them up, they can't do it. And that's a great model for the world. They've been, especially in the last 150 years between communism, the National Socialism, been trying to shut off the gospel, especially communism, Marxism. Try to shut off the gospel. You can try to shut it off all you want. You ain't going to stop it. You ain't going to stop it. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. You'll be a dustbin in history, and the church will still be alive and flourishing. You'll be just a footnote in history. I'm talking about these ideologies. They come and they go. You can't shut down the heart to believe, the irresistible desire to believe, and to believe in more than what life in this world can give you. We are born for immortality, and Christ is the hope of the immortal. It's Easter, you see. It is a primal hope. You want to promise us good 3 squares daily, no heavy lifting. Okay, you want to say that. You want to promise some ideological solution to the world's problem. Go ahead. But the human heart is unsatisfiable. It seeks more. I think it seeks an absolute and a final justice, a final right order of things. We're unsatisfied with the close but not complete. We yearn for immortality. We yearn for life. We yearn for justice and fairness in life, the right order of things. You can't shut us off, you see. You can't shut us off. Just as soon as you squash it in one place, it pops up in another. I expect to see, not in my lifetime, but it had already taken place, but it's going to be flourishing. In the next 100 years, you're going to see the church flourishing in Asia, especially China. It already flourished in Africa. I would hope a rebirth in Europe. And I hope the American church doesn't collapse and need to be rebuilt. I think it needs renovation. It needs renewal. Not renovation, but renewal. But it is very much still alive. But will it stay alive? It won't be an ideology that will be destroying it, as it tried to destroy the communists, etc., Marxism. Be more, I don't know what. It will die of indifference, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. You'll see. Depends on how old you are as listening to this. We'll see. But I think there is such a deep yearning. There's a deep religious yearning in people. Even when they suppress it, it manifests itself. It's a yearning for immortality. We seek the immortal. We seek life. See? And we're not going to be constrained from that searching. You can shut us off for 5 minutes, but you're going to be listening for the gospel someplace else. You are going to look for it. I think that's really true. And so the story in the Gospels, in the Acts, you see them getting thrown in prison, but they go right back out and preach it. And then you say, well, you whack them. Go ahead, whack them. The blood of the martyrs is the most powerful witness to the Christianity that there is, the blood of the martyrs. I know out of the side of Christ comes blood, which is, of course, the Eucharist, but it's also the blood of the martyrs. If you look at the side of Christ on Good Friday, when the lance gets put into him, water and blood, I take that being not only baptism in the Eucharist, but baptism in martyrdom. The blood of the martyrs is the life of the church. The suffering of the church is the source of her life. It's because she, with Christ, is crucified on Good Friday. See? Yeah, the Roman Empire collapsed. Christianity thrives. You see? That's how it works. Anyway, in the stories today in the Acts of the Apostles, there's an interesting thing because it's the early life of the church. And one of the things they did, they expected the end of time to come very immediately. They were anticipating Christ's return very soon. And so they lived they lived accordingly, and so they held every property in common. They lived in it. We would call it a communist way of life. Today, if you want to see an example, it's religious way of life. You take vows to poverty. You don't own anything, you see, in that regard. They said there was no need for no needy person among them. For those who owned property or houses would sell them, bring the proceeds of the sale, and put them at the feet of the apostles. And they were distributed to each according to need. You see? That was the early life of the church. But the church learns as she evolves within a culture. And in this sense, this didn't last. Maybe it lasted in the life of the apostles, but it didn't last for long. And what happens is, where it took that form was in religious life, in the monks in the desert. And that begins in the 2nd century, where they gave up all things to the beginning of monasticism. See? To be as free as the wind. Those of us join religious life, don't join it to give things up for the sake of giving them up. It's to be free of neither property or progeny. Neither property nor progeny. You can go wherever the church needs you. And I have to say, that's true of religious life. And I saw it very, very plainly. Even for myself, when you join a religious order, you don't think back to your past and think, well, when, your family, etc. You do in love, but you don't look as if you're going to go back to it. You're free to go wherever. You look to the church where I'm going to go. Even when I came out here in St. Louis in 1971, I didn't look and see anything about my family or anything else. This is where I was supposed to be. I was already 12 years in the outfit, you see. You go wherever. And I was certainly impressed by the men who went to China and the foreign missions. They didn't look over their shoulder. See, the whole essence of religious life was to be free to go where the gospel was to be preached. I saw it. I saw it in the men who went to China and who had to come home, to come back to the United States because the communists took over. Many of them went to prison, and they came back from having been in prison. I remember asking one man, Father Joseph Haberber, wait a minute, Ubinger, Father Ubinger, and I said to him, would you ever go back? He said, I'd walk back if I could. Yeah, I'd walk back if I could. See, that was the spirit. That's the spirit. Where you want to see the spirit of the early church here, you look at religious orders. That's where they pick it up from, and it's to be free to serve the church wherever the church requires us to go. And it's really true. It's how it works. You see, but that isn't the church universal. It can't work that way. You got families. You got homes. You got to make a living. You got to raise your children. You see? And that didn't take long for the church to recognize it. In her own spiritual evolution, she saw that marriage entails property. It requires raising your children in communities of faith and love, but also property and livelihoods. And that is affected by the socioeconomic culture that you're in. You see? Yeah. You serve the church within the ethos of your life, within the demands of your life. The sacrament of marriage requires home building. I don't know how else to put it. You build a home, you have a job, you make a living, you raise your children. That requires stability. You're not as free as a monk who could go anywhere in the world at a drop of a hat. It's not supposed to. It's a different vocation. And the church is served by all. And I think the beauty of St. Mark's gospel is so simple. It's so direct. Preach the gospel wherever you are, whoever you are, and whatever you are. And for some of us, it was to give up property and progeny, to be free, to go in a certain way. But for somebody else, it is to marry and raise a family, or be single and have a career, whatever. See, whatever. The church is rich in her variety of callings. The gospel is not a singular call to one way of life. It's a calling to live sacramentally, make Christ present in whatever we are doing and however we're doing it. That's the truth. I hope I didn't say anything wrong today. Paul Ubinger, that was his name. God almighty, I could say it 1,000 times. I lived with him. And all of a sudden, I couldn't get it right. So, excuse me, Paul. I'm sure you're in paradise. He died at least 50 years ago. A great man. A little pipsqueak of a guy. The communists threw him in prison. They didn't break him for 1 second. He was a tough little guy. Yeah. I'd walk back if I could. You know what? He meant it.